My parents threw me out on the street when I was 19 because I refused to drop out of college to support my stepfather's gambling debts. They said I was selfish and ungrateful. 3 months later, my Navy SEAL brother came home from deployment to find me sleeping in my car outside a 24-hour diner. What happened next changed everything and showed me what real family actually means. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica, and I am 22 years old now, but this story begins when I was 19 and believed that family meant unconditional love and support. I grew up in Riverside, California, in a modest 2-bedroom house that my mother inherited from her parents. The neighborhood was working class but stable, with tree-lined streets and families who had lived there for generations. My mother, Linda, had married my stepfather, Rick, when I was 12 years old. My biological father had died in a construction accident when I was 8, leaving my mother to raise me and my older brother Marcus on her own for several years. When Rick came into our lives, he seemed like the stability we needed. He worked as a warehouse supervisor and promised to take care of us. Marcus had joined the Navy right after high school, driven by a desire to serve his country and create a better life for himself. By the time this story begins, he had completed SEAL training and was deployed overseas on classified missions. We communicated through emails and occasional video calls when his schedule and security protocols allowed, but months would pass between meaningful conversations. The foundation of my world rested on the assumption that the people who raised me would support my efforts to build a better future. I had worked throughout high school to maintain excellent grades while helping with household expenses through part-time jobs at local restaurants and retail stores. My academic achievements earned me a partial scholarship to the University of California at Riverside, where I planned to study business administration. College represented more than education to me. It symbolized the pathway to financial independence and the ability to contribute meaningfully to my family's long-term security. I understood that my mother had sacrificed opportunities for her own advancement to raise Marcus and me after our father died, and I viewed my education as an investment that would eventually allow me to support her in return. The house where I grew up contained memories of both joy and struggle. The living room held family photos documenting birthdays, holidays, and milestones that seemed to prove we belonged together, despite the challenges we faced. My mother had worked multiple jobs to keep us housed and fed, and I respected her determination and resilience during those difficult years after my father's death. Rick's integration into our family had appeared successful initially. He brought steady income and adult male presence that provided stability during my teenage years. He attended school events, helped with homework, and seemed genuinely interested in my academic progress and future plans. This support reinforced my belief that he viewed me as his daughter, rather than simply my mother's child from a previous relationship. The contrast between appearance and reality would prove central to understanding the betrayal that followed. While our family projected an image of unity and mutual support, underlying tensions and conflicting priorities remained hidden beneath the surface of daily routines and pleasant interactions. My college experience during my freshman year reinforced my commitment to academic achievement and personal growth. The university environment exposed me to ideas, opportunities, and perspectives that expanded my understanding of what might be possible for my future. I thrived in the challenging academic atmosphere while maintaining the work ethic that had served me throughout high school. The demands of college required careful balance between studying, attending classes, and working part-time to cover expenses not addressed by my partial scholarship. I found employment at the campus bookstore, which provided flexible scheduling that accommodated my academic commitments while generating income for books, supplies, and personal expenses. My relationship with my mother during this period reflected the natural evolution that occurs when young adults begin establishing independence while maintaining family connections. We spoke regularly by phone, and I visited home every few weeks to help with household tasks and spend time together. These interactions seemed normal and positive, providing no indication of the crisis that was developing. Rick's behavior during this period appeared supportive and encouraging. He asked about my classes, expressed pride in my academic performance, and seemed to understand that my education represented an investment in our family's future prosperity. His questions about my studies and career plans suggested genuine interest in my development and success. The financial pressures affecting our household remained largely invisible to me during my freshman year. My focus on academic achievement and campus life limited my awareness of the economic challenges that Rick and my mother were experiencing. I assumed that Rick's steady employment provided sufficient income for their needs, especially with my reduced presence in the household. The gambling addiction that would ultimately destroy our family relationship had been developing gradually over several years, though Rick had successfully concealed its extent and impact from both my mother and me. The signs were subtle initially: occasional trips to nearby casinos that he described as entertainment, lottery tickets that seemed like harmless fun, and sports betting that appeared to be casual recreation rather than compulsive behavior. My mother's trust in Rick's financial management meant that she did not closely monitor their household budget or question his explanations for occasional financial shortfalls. She focused on her own employment responsibilities while assuming that Rick was handling their shared financial obligations responsibly and transparently. The progression from casual gambling to addictive behavior followed patterns that are common among individuals who develop this destructive habit. Initial small wins reinforced Rick's belief that he could generate income through gambling, leading to larger bets and more frequent casino visits. When losses occurred, he convinced himself that continued gambling would allow him to recover his losses and return to profitability. The psychological mechanisms that sustain gambling addiction include the illusion of control, the belief that past losses increase the probability of future wins, and the emotional excitement that gambling provides as an escape from mundane daily responsibilities. Rick's addiction incorporated all these elements while gradually consuming larger portions of his income and attention. The secrecy required to maintain his gambling habit forced Rick to develop elaborate deceptions about his whereabouts, his spending, and the family's financial situation. These deceptions created psychological stress that manifested in increased irritability, mood swings, and occasional angry outbursts that seemed disproportionate to their apparent triggers. My mother's response to Rick's changing behavior reflected her desire to maintain family stability and her assumption that his difficulties were temporary stress related to work pressure or other manageable challenges. She provided emotional support and understanding while remaining unaware of the fundamental problem that was driving his behavioral changes. The financial consequences of Rick's gambling addiction gradually depleted their savings, created credit card debt, and eventually threatened their ability to meet basic household obligations, including mortgage payments, utilities, and food expenses. The progression from financial comfort to crisis occurred over several months, with each stage hidden from external observation through increasingly desperate measures. Rick's attempts to solve his financial problems through continued gambling reflected the irrational thinking that characterizes addiction. Rather than acknowledging his losses and seeking help, he convinced himself that larger bets would provide the breakthrough that would resolve all his difficulties and restore their financial security. The mounting pressure of accumulating debt and the fear of discovery created psychological desperation that would ultimately lead Rick to view my college education as an unnecessary expense that prevented me from contributing to the household income through full-time employment. This perspective represented a fundamental shift from viewing my education as an investment to viewing it as a selfish luxury that the family could no longer afford. My mother's gradual awareness of their financial difficulties occurred through a series of small discoveries: bills that arrived past due, credit card statements that showed balances she did not recognize, and Rick's evasive responses to questions about their budget. Her trust in Rick's financial management made it difficult for her to accept the extent of their problems or the underlying cause. The transformation of Rick's attitude toward my education reflected his growing desperation and his need to find solutions that did not require him to acknowledge or address his gambling addiction. Blaming external circumstances, including my college expenses, provided a way to avoid confronting the real source of their financial crisis. The stage was now set for the confrontation that would shatter my understanding of family loyalty and force me to discover strength I did not know I possessed. The foundation of trust and mutual support that I believed defined our family relationship was about to be revealed as an illusion that could not survive the pressure of Rick's addiction and the choices he would demand that I make. The contrast between my academic success and growing independence on one hand, and the hidden crisis developing at home on the other, created the tension that would soon explode into open conflict. The values and priorities that had seemed aligned when life was stable would prove incompatible when survival was at stake. In our next episode, we will explore the moment when Rick's gambling addiction could no longer be hidden, and the devastating choice he would demand that I make between my education and my family's immediate financial needs. We will see how quickly trust can be destroyed, and how the people we depend on can become the sources of our greatest challenges. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The revelation that would shatter my understanding of family loyalty arrived through an overheard phone conversation on a Wednesday evening in late February of my sophomore year. I had returned home from university for a brief visit, expecting to spend a quiet evening helping my mother with household tasks and enjoying the comfort of familiar surroundings. The house felt different the moment I entered through the front door. The usual warmth and welcoming atmosphere had been replaced by an underlying tension that I could not immediately identify. My mother greeted me with enthusiasm, but her smile seemed forced, and Rick appeared distracted and agitated in ways that suggested significant stress beneath his surface pleasantries. During dinner, their conversation remained superficial, focusing on neutral topics like weather and neighborhood events, while carefully avoiding any discussion of finances, future plans, or personal concerns. The unnatural restraint in their communication created an atmosphere of artificial normalcy that made me increasingly uncomfortable as the evening progressed. Rick excused himself immediately after the meal, claiming he needed to handle some work-related phone calls in his home office. His departure left my mother and me alone in the kitchen, where her demeanor immediately shifted from forced cheerfulness to obvious anxiety and exhaustion. "Mom, is everything okay?" I asked, noticing the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands trembled slightly as she cleared the dinner dishes. "Everything is fine, honey," she replied with unconvincing brightness. "Just some temporary financial stress that Rick is handling. Nothing for you to worry about while you are focusing on your studies." Her reassurance felt hollow and scripted, as if she had rehearsed the response to deflect questions she anticipated but dreaded answering. The deliberate vagueness of her explanation and her reluctance to maintain eye contact suggested that the problems they were facing extended far beyond normal household financial pressures. I offered to help with the dishes, hoping that continued conversation might reveal more about the source of the tension I sensed throughout the house. However, my mother seemed eager to end our interaction, suggesting that I should go to my room and rest after the drive from campus. The dismissal felt unusual, given that our visits together typically included extended conversations about my classes, social life, and future plans. Her apparent desire to avoid meaningful discussion heightened my concern, while also creating curiosity about what information she might be trying to protect me from discovering. Unable to sleep due to the unsettled atmosphere in the house, I remained alert to the sounds of movement and conversation that continued well past our family's normal bedtime routine. The low murmur of voices from Rick's office suggested that his work-related phone calls were continuing for an unusually extended period. Around 11:30, I heard Rick's office door open and the sound of his footsteps moving toward the kitchen. The conversation that followed between him and my mother would provide the first glimpse into the crisis that had been developing beneath the surface of our apparently stable family life. "Linda, we need to make some serious decisions about our situation," Rick's voice carried through the thin walls of our older house. "The credit counselor was very clear about our options, and none of them are particularly attractive." "What exactly did she say?" My mother responded with obvious apprehension. "She said that with our current debt-to-income ratio and the missed payments from the last 3 months, we are looking at either bankruptcy or some form of debt consolidation that would require significant lifestyle changes and additional income sources." The words hit me like a physical blow. Bankruptcy, missed payments, debt consolidation. These were not the temporary financial pressures that my mother had described, but rather indicators of serious economic crisis that threatened our family's fundamental stability and security. "How did it get this bad, Rick? I thought you were managing our finances responsibly. You told me that our budget was tight but sustainable." The question in my mother's voice carried both confusion and accusation, suggesting that Rick's financial management had not been as transparent as she had believed. Her tone indicated that she was learning about the extent of their problems at the same time I was discovering the situation through eavesdropping. "It got this bad because life is expensive and my income has not kept pace with our obligations," Rick replied with defensive irritation. "The warehouse cut overtime hours 6 months ago, and we have had unexpected expenses that exceeded our emergency reserves. His explanation focused on external circumstances while avoiding any mention of personal choices or spending decisions that might have contributed to their financial difficulties. The defensive tone suggested that he was not prepared to accept responsibility for poor financial management or acknowledge mistakes in judgment. "What kind of unexpected expenses?" my mother pressed, her voice gaining strength as she apparently decided to pursue answers rather than accepting vague explanations. The pause that followed lasted long enough for me to count my own heartbeats, while wondering whether Rick would provide honest disclosure about the specific factors that had created their crisis situation. Medical bills from my back injury last year, car repairs that we could not avoid, higher utility costs during the winter months, and some poor investment decisions that did not work out as expected, he finally responded. The phrase poor investment decisions stood out as potentially significant, though Rick's tone suggested reluctance to elaborate on this particular category of expense. The deliberate vagueness about these investments, combined with his obvious discomfort discussing the topic, created suspicion that this might represent more than simple financial miscalculation. "What kind of investment decisions, Rick?" We agreed that we would discuss any major financial commitments before making them. My mother's question revealed that Rick had made financial choices without her knowledge or consent, violating agreements about shared decision-making that were fundamental to their marriage partnership. The breach of trust this represented was potentially as significant as the financial losses themselves. "Look, Linda, I made some calculated risks with money that I thought we could afford to lose, hoping to generate additional income that would improve our long-term financial security. Unfortunately, those risks did not pay off the way I expected." The euphemistic language Rick used to describe his activities avoided specific terminology while suggesting behavior that involved speculation or gambling, rather than traditional investment strategies. His reluctance to provide detailed explanations increased my suspicion that his calculated risks had been neither calculated nor reasonable. "Are you talking about gambling, Rick? Please tell me you have not been gambling with our savings." The direct question from my mother cut through Rick's evasive language and forced acknowledgement of the specific behavior that had apparently contributed to their financial crisis. Her tone carried desperation and fear, suggesting that gambling problems would represent a betrayal of trust that exceeded simple financial mismanagement. "It was not gambling in the traditional sense, Linda. It was strategic sports betting based on careful analysis of team performance, player statistics, and game conditions. I was applying analytical skills and insider knowledge to generate additional income for our family." Rick's response revealed the delusional thinking that characterizes gambling addiction. His description of sports betting as strategic analysis rather than gambling demonstrated his complete inability to recognize the mathematical inevitability of losses over time in games designed to favor the house rather than individual bettors. "Strategic sports betting is gambling, Rick. How much money are we talking about?" Quote, the directness of my mother's question reflected her growing understanding that Rick's activities represented a fundamental threat to their financial security, rather than simply poor judgment about investment opportunities. Over the past 8 months, approximately $28,000. The amount was staggering. $28,000 represented more money than I had ever seen in one place, more than my annual college expenses, more than most families in our neighborhood earned in several months of full-time employment. The silence that followed Rick's admission lasted long enough for the full implications of his confession to register with my mother and with me as I listened from my bedroom. Our family's financial crisis was not the result of economic circumstances beyond their control, but rather the predictable consequence of Rick's gambling addiction and the poor decisions that addiction had generated. $28,000. My mother repeated slowly, as if saying the amount aloud might change its reality or reveal it as some kind of misunderstanding. "I know it sounds like a lot of money, but you have to understand that I was very close to winning much larger amounts on several occasions. The difference between success and failure in sports betting often comes down to luck and referee decisions that no amount of analysis can predict." Rick's response demonstrated his continued belief that gambling losses resulted from external factors, rather than the mathematical disadvantage that makes all forms of gambling unprofitable over extended periods. His focus on near wins and external explanations revealed the cognitive distortions that sustain addictive behavior despite repeated negative outcomes. "Rick, that money was supposed to be for Jessica's remaining college expenses and our emergency fund. How are we going to pay for her education now?" The mention of my name and my educational expenses transformed the conversation from an abstract discussion about family finances into a direct threat to my academic future and career aspirations. The realization that Rick's gambling had consumed resources specifically designated for my college costs created personal stakes that made the crisis immediately relevant to my own life planning. That is exactly what I want to discuss with you, Linda. We need to have a family meeting where we talk honestly about everyone's priorities and responsibilities during this difficult period. The euphemistic language Rick used to describe a family meeting suggested that he was preparing to present demands or ultimatums that would require other family members to sacrifice their goals in order to address problems his gambling had created. What kind of responsibilities are you talking about? I am talking about everyone in this family contributing to our recovery instead of expecting other people to solve problems while they pursue personal interests that benefit no one but themselves. The indirect reference to my college education as personal interests that benefit no one revealed Rick's perspective on my academic achievements and career preparation. In his view, my education represented selfish luxury rather than investment in capabilities that could benefit our family's long-term prosperity. Rick, Jessica's education is not a personal interest. It is an investment in her future and our family's future. She is building skills and credentials that will allow her to support herself and potentially help us as well. My mother's defense of my educational pursuits provided some comfort, though her tone suggested uncertainty about whether she could maintain this position if Rick's demands for family sacrifice became more specific and urgent. Her future and our family's future depend on having a house to live in, and financial stability that allows basic survival, Linda. If we lose this house because we cannot make mortgage payments, Jessica's college degree will not help anyone. Rick's framing of the choice between my education and family survival represented manipulation designed to generate guilt and compliance through fear of homelessness and financial ruin. His argument ignored alternative solutions that would address the gambling addiction underlying their crisis, while preserving educational investments already made. The conversation continued with increasing intensity as Rick built toward specific demands that would force me to choose between my academic goals and my family's immediate financial needs. The revelation that our family crisis resulted from gambling addiction rather than unavoidable economic circumstances fundamentally altered my understanding of both the problem and appropriate responses to it. As I listened to this discussion about my future being conducted without my knowledge or input, I realized that the comfortable assumptions about family support and shared values that had guided my life planning were dissolving under the pressure of Rick's addiction and the desperate choices it was generating. The foundation of trust and mutual commitment that I had believed defined our family relationships was proving inadequate to withstand the psychological and financial pressures that gambling addiction created. The conversation I was overhearing would soon force me to confront impossible choices about loyalty, sacrifice, and the price of maintaining family relationships when addiction distorts normal moral reasoning. In our next episode, we will witness the direct confrontation that occurs when Rick discovers that I overheard this conversation and demands that I choose between my education and his interpretation of family loyalty. We will see how quickly relationships can be transformed when desperation overrides love and addiction corrupts judgment about what constitutes reasonable sacrifice versus enabling destructive behavior. The confrontation began when I accidentally knocked over my duffel bag while trying to retreat to my bedroom. The sound of books and clothes spilling across the hardwood floor echoed through the house like a gunshot, immediately silencing the argument in the kitchen. "Jessica?" My mother's voice carried a mixture of surprise and concern. "Honey, when did you get home?" I had two choices in that moment. I could pretend I had just arrived and knew nothing about their financial crisis, or I could face the situation directly with the knowledge I had gained through eavesdropping. The decision would determine not just the immediate conversation, but my entire relationship with honesty and confrontation for the rest of my life. "About 20 minutes ago," I said, stepping into the kitchen doorway with my shoulders straight and my voice steady. I heard everything. The silence that followed lasted long enough for me to study both their faces and understand exactly how much my presence had changed the dynamic of their conflict. My mother looked relieved, as if she hoped my involvement might provide support for her position. Rick looked trapped, as if my knowledge of his gambling addiction represented a threat to his ability to control the narrative about our family's problems. Everything? Rick asked, his voice carrying a warning tone that suggested I should be careful about how much I admitted to knowing. The gambling. The $37,000. The maxed-out credit cards. The bounced mortgage payment. I spoke each phrase deliberately, making it clear that I understood the full scope of our crisis and would not allow anyone to minimize or misrepresent the situation. My mother moved toward me with an expression of concern and embarrassment. Jessica, honey, we didn't want you to worry about this during your studies. We were trying to handle the situation ourselves before involving you in our problems. Handle the situation? I looked directly at Rick, whose face was reddening with what appeared to be a combination of shame and anger. By asking me to drop out of college and get a full-time job to pay for gambling losses? The directness of my question stripped away any possibility of avoiding the central issue that their argument had been building toward. Rick could no longer frame his suggestion as a reasonable response to generic financial difficulties. He had to defend the specific request that I sacrifice my education to compensate for his addiction. Rick's response revealed the depth of his desperation and the extent to which his thinking had been corrupted by the psychological patterns that sustain gambling addiction. Jessica, you're young. You don't understand how serious this situation is. We could lose this house. We could lose everything. I understand that you gambled away $37,000, I replied, maintaining eye contact despite the intimidation in his posture. I understand that you want me to fix the problem you created by giving up everything I've worked for. What I don't understand is why that seems reasonable to you. The question challenged Rick to explain the logic behind his proposal, and forced him to confront the fundamental unfairness of asking me to bear the consequences of his choices. His response would reveal whether he possessed any genuine concern for my welfare or viewed me simply as a resource to be exploited during his crisis. Reasonable? Rick's voice rose with indignation. What's reasonable is family members helping each other when times are tough. What's reasonable is everyone making sacrifices to keep this family together. What's reasonable is putting survival ahead of dreams. The framing of my education as dreams rather than practical preparation for adult life demonstrated Rick's complete dismissal of the value of my achievements and planning. In his desperation, he had reduced 4 years of academic work and career preparation to frivolous fantasy that could be abandoned without consequence. My education isn't a dream, Rick. It's my preparation for supporting myself and contributing to society. I paused to let that statement settle before continuing. And the sacrifices you're talking about aren't shared sacrifices. You're asking me to sacrifice everything while you sacrifice nothing. The distinction between shared sacrifice and one-sided exploitation became central to the moral framework of our confrontation. Rick was presenting his demands as family solidarity, while actually requesting that I bear all the costs of solving problems I had not created. My mother stepped between us, recognizing that the conversation was escalating toward a confrontation that might damage relationships permanently. Let's all take a breath and try to find a solution that works for everyone. There is no solution that works for everyone, Mom. My response was directed at her, but intended for Rick's benefit as well. Either I give up my education and my future to pay for Rick's gambling debts, or I continue college and Rick faces the consequences of his own choices. The binary nature of the choice eliminated the possibility of compromise or middle ground that might allow everyone to avoid difficult decisions. Rick's addiction had created a crisis that required someone to bear significant costs, and he was demanding that I be the one to suffer those consequences. Rick's desperation became more apparent as he realized that his initial approach was not generating the guilt and compliance he had expected. Jessica, I raised you for 7 years. I put food on your table and clothes on your back. I helped with your homework and drove you to school events. Doesn't that count for anything? The appeal to gratitude and obligation represented a classic manipulation technique designed to generate emotional compliance through guilt rather than logical agreement. Rick was attempting to reframe his parental responsibilities as investments that entitled him to demand sacrifice from me during his crisis. It counts for everything, Rick. That's why this conversation is so painful. I kept my voice steady despite the emotional impact of his words. But taking care of me when I was a child doesn't give you the right to destroy my future when you need money. The response acknowledged Rick's contributions while establishing clear boundaries about what those contributions did and did not entitle him to expect from me. The distinction between parental responsibility and emotional manipulation became crucial for maintaining my psychological independence during the confrontation. My mother's intervention revealed her own internal struggle between supporting my position and maintaining her relationship with Rick. "Rick, maybe there are other options we haven't considered. Maybe we could talk to a financial counselor or look into debt consolidation programs." Financial counselors and debt consolidation programs aren't going to put $37,000 back in our savings account, Linda. Rick's response dismissed alternative solutions and reinforced his position that my sacrifice represented the only viable path forward. The rejection of alternative approaches demonstrated Rick's unwillingness to explore solutions that would require him to acknowledge his gambling addiction or accept long-term consequences for his choices. He preferred immediate relief through my sacrifice rather than systematic recovery through professional assistance. "They might not replace the money immediately," I said, "but they would address the real problem instead of just treating the symptoms. Even if I dropped out of college and got a full-time job, what happens the next time you decide to gamble away our savings?" The question challenged Rick to explain how my sacrifice would provide long-term security rather than simply temporary relief that would be followed by additional crises as his addiction continued. His inability to address this concern revealed the short-term desperation driving his demands. Rick's anger intensified as he realized that I would not be intimidated or manipulated into voluntary compliance with his demands. The next time? There won't be a next time. This was a temporary setback caused by bad luck and poor officiating. I've learned from the experience. The response demonstrated the delusional thinking that characterizes gambling addiction. Rick genuinely believed that his losses resulted from external factors rather than the inevitable mathematical disadvantage that makes gambling unprofitable over time. His confidence in avoiding future problems revealed his complete inability to recognize or address the underlying addiction. Bad luck and poor officiating? I stared at him with disbelief. "Rick, you lost $37,000 gambling. That's not bad luck. That's addiction." The direct naming of his condition stripped away the euphemisms and rationalizations that had allowed Rick to avoid confronting the reality of his situation. The word addiction carried implications about treatment, recovery, and personal responsibility that Rick was not prepared to accept. "I am not an addict," Rick responded with vehemence that suggested the accusation had struck close to the truth. "I made some poor choices during a difficult period. That's completely different from addiction." The denial represented the final confirmation that Rick was not ready to address his gambling problem through treatment or behavior change. His preferred solution involved having others bear the consequences of his choices, while he maintained the illusion that his gambling represented rational decision-making rather than compulsive behavior. My mother's expression revealed her growing understanding that the crisis extended beyond simple financial difficulties to include fundamental questions about Rick's character and judgment. She was beginning to recognize that supporting his demands might enable continued destructive behavior rather than solving our family's problems. "If you're not an addict, then prove it," I said, looking directly at Rick. "Agree to stop gambling completely. Agree to attend counseling sessions. Agree to turn over financial control to Mom until you've demonstrated that you can be trusted with money." Quote, the challenge exposed the difference between Rick's claims about controlling his gambling and his actual willingness to accept restrictions on his behavior. His response would reveal whether his promises about learning from the experience represented genuine commitment to change or simply words intended to manipulate my compliance. Rick's reaction was immediate and defensive. "I don't need counseling. I don't need supervision. I need my family to support me through a difficult time instead of attacking me when I'm already down." The refusal to accept accountability measures confirmed that Rick's promises about avoiding future gambling were not supported by genuine commitment to behavior change. He wanted the benefits of family support without the responsibilities that would accompany genuine recovery from addiction. The confrontation had reached the point where each person's fundamental values and priorities were clearly revealed. Rick prioritized immediate relief from consequences over long-term solutions. My mother struggled between loyalty to her husband and protection of my future. I was committed to maintaining my educational goals despite the emotional cost of family conflict. Then we have nothing more to discuss, I said, recognizing that further conversation would only repeat the same arguments without producing any resolution. I will not drop out of college to pay for your gambling debts. The finality of my statement eliminated any remaining possibility of compromise or negotiation. Rick would need to decide whether to accept my refusal and seek alternative solutions, or escalate the conflict through ultimatums and emotional manipulation. His response would determine the immediate future of our family relationships and establish the framework for all subsequent interactions. The moment of truth had arrived, and each person would be forced to choose between their stated values and their immediate comfort. Rick's face darkened as he realized that his appeals to gratitude, family loyalty, and survival had failed to produce the compliance he demanded. The next phase of our confrontation would reveal exactly how far he was willing to go to force my cooperation with his demands. In our next episode, we will witness Rick's escalation to ultimatums and threats, as he attempts to force my compliance through emotional manipulation and the threat of family abandonment. We will see how quickly love can transform into coercion when desperation overrides moral boundaries. The transformation in Rick's demeanor was immediate and chilling. The mask of reasonable concern that he had maintained throughout our conversation dissolved completely, revealing the desperation and anger that his gambling addiction had cultivated beneath the surface of our family relationships. "Fine," he said, his voice dropping to a level that carried more menace than his earlier shouting. "If that's your decision, then you need to understand the consequences. This is my house, these are my rules, and I will not support someone who refuses to help this family when we need it most." The shift from persuasion to ultimatum marked a fundamental change in the nature of our relationship. Rick was no longer appealing to my sense of family loyalty or attempting to convince me that his proposal served my best interests. He was now threatening to use his authority and resources to force compliance through deprivation and abandonment. My mother stepped forward, her face pale with the realization that Rick was prepared to escalate the conflict beyond rational discussion into territory that would permanently damage our family bonds. "Rick, you can't be serious, she's our daughter." "She's your daughter," Rick corrected with deliberate emphasis on the possessive pronoun. "And she just made it very clear that her education is more important to her than her family's survival. So let her see how well that education serves her when she doesn't have a family to fall back on." The distinction between your daughter and our daughter represented Rick's psychological severance of any parental relationship or responsibility he felt toward me. In his mind, my refusal to sacrifice my future for his immediate needs had transformed me from a family member deserving protection into an adversary whose welfare was no longer his concern. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest as I recognized that Rick was prepared to abandon me completely rather than accept responsibility for the consequences of his gambling addiction. The man who had attended my school plays and helped with homework assignments was revealing that his affection had always been conditional on my compliance with his expectations. "What exactly are you saying, Rick?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the fear that was beginning to build in my throat. "I'm saying that if you want to choose college over family, then you can pay for college without family support. I'm saying that if you think you're too good to help us during our crisis, then you're too good to live in our house and eat our food." The ultimatum was delivered with the calculated cruelty of someone who understood exactly how much damage his words would inflict. Rick knew that I depended on our home as a stable base during school breaks, and that my part-time income could not support independent living while maintaining my academic commitments. My mother's response carried desperation as she realized that Rick was prepared to destroy our family rather than confront his own responsibility for our financial crisis. "Rick, please. Let's talk about this rationally. There has to be another way." "The rational way was for Jessica to help her family when we needed her," Rick replied without shifting his gaze from my face. "She chose to be selfish instead. Now she can live with the consequences of that choice." The framing of my refusal to abandon my education as selfish demonstrated Rick's complete inability to distinguish between reasonable self-preservation and genuine selfishness. In his distorted thinking, any choice that prioritized my long-term welfare over his immediate needs represented a moral failing that justified punishment. "When do you want me gone?" I asked, Recognizing that further argument would only provide Rick with additional opportunities to inflict emotional damage through cruel remarks about my character and worth. The question surprised both Rick and my mother, though for different reasons. Rick had expected me to capitulate when faced with the prospect of homelessness. My mother had hoped that my acceptance of his ultimatum might shock Rick into reconsidering his position. "Tonight," Rick said after a moment of hesitation that suggested he had not fully considered the practical implications of his threat. "Pack your things and leave tonight. If college is so important to you, then go live on campus and figure out how to pay for it yourself." The immediate timeline revealed the extent of Rick's anger and his desire to inflict maximum disruption on my life as punishment for my refusal to comply with his demands. He was not simply removing support. He was actively creating crisis conditions designed to force me into desperate circumstances that might compel future compliance. My mother's face reflected horror as she realized that Rick was serious about forcing me to leave our home immediately, without time to arrange alternative housing or adjust my financial situation to accommodate independent living expenses. "Rick, she can't just leave tonight. She doesn't have anywhere to go. She doesn't have money for an apartment or deposits, or any of the things she would need to live independently." "That's not my problem anymore," Rick replied with a coldness that eliminated any remaining doubt about his commitment to following through on his threat. "She made her choice. Now she can live with it." The rejection of any responsibility for my welfare after 7 years of acting as my stepfather demonstrated the complete breakdown of Rick's capacity for parental thinking. His gambling addiction had corrupted not just his financial judgment, but his ability to maintain basic human concern for someone he had claimed to love. I walked to my room and began gathering my belongings, focusing on essential items that would fit in my car and support my immediate survival needs. The task of deciding what to take and what to leave behind forced me to confront the reality that I was being expelled from the only stable home I had known since childhood. My mother followed me, tears streaming down her face as she watched me pack clothes and textbooks into duffel bags and cardboard boxes. "Jessica, honey, maybe if you just agreed to take a semester off, we could work something out. Maybe you could come back to school after we get through this crisis." The suggestion represented my mother's attempt to find a compromise that might satisfy Rick's immediate demands, while preserving some possibility of my eventual return to college. However, her proposal still required me to sacrifice my education, based on Rick's promise that his gambling problems were temporary and would not recur. "Mom, if I drop out now, I'll lose my scholarships. I'll lose my place in the program. And there's no guarantee that Rick won't have another crisis next semester that requires me to stay out of school longer." I continued folding clothes while speaking, using the physical activity to maintain emotional control during the conversation. He promised that this was a one-time mistake. He said he learned his lesson and won't gamble anymore. He also promised that he wasn't an addict and refused to accept any accountability measures that would actually prevent future gambling. I stopped packing and looked directly at my mother. "Mom, if he's really committed to change, why won't he agree to counseling or financial supervision?" The question forced my mother to confront the inconsistency between Rick's claims about controlling his gambling behavior and his refusal to accept restrictions that would demonstrate genuine commitment to change. Her inability to answer revealed her own doubts about the reliability of his promises. "I don't know, honey. I don't know what to think about any of this anymore." The admission represented my mother's recognition that Rick's behavior had exceeded the boundaries of rational response to financial crisis and entered territory that she could not understand or justify. Her confusion reflected the disorientation that occurs when someone you trust reveals fundamentally different values and priorities than you had believed they possessed. I finished packing my essential belongings and carried the bags to my car, making multiple trips while Rick remained in the kitchen, apparently unwilling to witness the implementation of his ultimatum. His absence during my departure suggested that some part of him recognized the cruelty of his actions, even if he was not prepared to reconsider his position. My mother accompanied me to the car, continuing to express hope that the situation might be resolved through negotiation or compromise. "Maybe after a few days, when everyone has had time to cool down, we can all sit down and work out a solution that helps everyone." "Mom, this isn't about cooling down. This is about Rick choosing to punish me for refusing to fix problems that his addiction created." I loaded the last bag into my trunk and turned to face her. "Unless he's willing to get treatment for his gambling problem, this situation will only get worse. The statement represented my recognition that Rick's ultimatum was not an impulsive response to immediate stress, but rather a reflection of the psychological changes that gambling addiction had produced in his thinking and values. His willingness to abandon me rather than confront his own responsibility indicated fundamental character changes that would not be resolved through time or discussion. "Where will you go tonight?" my mother asked, her voice breaking as she realized that I was actually leaving and that Rick had no intention of preventing my departure. "I'll figure something out," I replied, not wanting to admit that I had no specific plan beyond driving to a 24-hour restaurant and using their restroom and Wi-Fi to search for emergency housing options. The uncertainty of my immediate future reflected the success of Rick's strategy of creating crisis conditions that would pressure me into compliance with his demands. He had calculated that the fear of homelessness and academic failure would override my resistance to abandoning my education. As I prepared to drive away from the house where I had lived for 7 years, I realized that Rick's ultimatum had forced me to discover strength and independence that I had not known I possessed. His attempt to control me through deprivation had instead liberated me from dependence on his approval and support. "I love you, Mom," I said, embracing her before getting into my car. "But I won't sacrifice my future to enable Rick's addiction." The statement represented my final declaration of independence from the emotional manipulation and threats that Rick had used to try to control my behavior. I was choosing uncertainty and hardship over the security that came with compliance to unreasonable demands. My mother's tears and desperate expression as I drove away reflected her understanding that Rick's ultimatum had not solved our family's problems, but had instead destroyed relationships and created additional suffering for everyone involved. His gambling addiction had claimed not just our financial resources, but the trust and affection that had held our family together. As I drove through the neighborhood where I had grown up, I felt a mixture of fear and determination that would sustain me through the challenges ahead. Rick's abandonment had been intended to break my spirit and force my submission. Instead, it had revealed my capacity for independent survival and confirmed my commitment to building a future based on my own efforts rather than dependence on others' approval. The lights of our house disappeared in my rearview mirror as I drove toward an uncertain future, carrying nothing but my belongings, my education, and my unwillingness to accept that other people's problems should become my permanent burdens. The journey ahead would test every aspect of my character and resilience, but it would also prove that the strength to survive and thrive had been within me all along. In our next episode, we will follow my first night of homelessness and the beginning of my struggle to maintain my education while surviving without family support. We will see how desperation can reveal hidden resources, and how the kindness of strangers can provide hope during the darkest moments. The parking lot of Danny's all-night diner became my first refuge as I confronted the reality of homelessness at 19 years old. The fluorescent lights from the restaurant cast harsh shadows across the asphalt where I sat in my Honda Civic, surrounded by everything I owned, trying to formulate a plan for immediate survival while processing the emotional devastation of family abandonment. The practical challenges of homelessness revealed themselves with brutal efficiency during those first hours. I needed safe places to sleep, shower, and store my belongings. I required consistent internet access to maintain communication with my professors and complete assignments. Most critically, I had to find ways to generate immediate income while preserving my class schedule and academic commitments. My financial situation was precarious but not hopeless. I had approximately $800 in my checking account from my campus bookstore job, enough to sustain basic expenses for several weeks if managed carefully. However, traditional housing options required security deposits, first month's rent, and utility connections that would consume my entire savings without providing long-term stability. The diner served as my temporary command center, while I researched emergency housing resources through my laptop, connected to their Wi-Fi network. The overnight manager, a kind woman named Maria, noticed my prolonged presence and approached with concern rather than suspicion. "You okay, honey? You've been out here for 3 hours." Her question forced me to articulate my situation for the first time, transforming abstract crisis into concrete reality that required specific responses and decisions. The act of explaining my circumstances to a stranger helped clarify my priorities and identify immediate action steps. "I'm dealing with some family issues and need to find temporary housing while I figure out a longer-term solution," I replied, maintaining dignity while acknowledging my vulnerability. Maria's response demonstrated the unexpected kindness that sometimes emerges during crisis situations. "We've got a clean restroom inside, and the coffee's always fresh if you need a warm place to sit and think." Her offer represented more than simple hospitality. It provided immediate access to basic facilities that would be essential for maintaining personal hygiene and professional appearance during my job search and academic responsibilities. The generosity of strangers would prove crucial for my survival during the coming weeks. I spent the remainder of that first night researching housing alternatives through online resources, discovering a network of emergency shelters, transitional housing programs, and youth services that I had never known existed. The availability of these resources provided hope while also revealing the scope of homelessness among young adults in our community. The University Housing Office provided my first potential solution when I discovered their emergency housing program for students experiencing family crisis. The program offered temporary dormitory space for up to 30 days while students arranged permanent housing alternatives. The application required documentation of my circumstances and a meeting with a counselor within 48 hours. Preparing the emergency housing application forced me to document Rick's ultimatum and my family's financial crisis in clinical terms that stripped away emotional context and focused on objective facts. The process of writing my statement helped me understand that I was not responsible for the situation and that seeking assistance represented appropriate self-advocacy rather than personal failure. The campus counselor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, provided both practical assistance and emotional support during our initial meeting. Her office represented the first truly safe space I had encountered since leaving home, allowing me to process the trauma of abandonment while developing concrete strategies for moving forward. "Jessica, what you're experiencing is unfortunately not uncommon among college students whose families face financial crises." Drive, Martinez explained during our session. "The important thing is that you recognize the difference between helping your family and enabling destructive behavior." Her validation of my decision to refuse Rick's demands provided crucial psychological support during a period when I questioned whether my commitment to education justified the pain I was causing my mother and the instability I was experiencing personally. Many students in similar situations feel guilty about pursuing their education when their families face difficulties, she continued. But sacrificing your future to address problems created by addiction typically enables continued destructive behavior rather than promoting genuine recovery. The professional perspective helped me understand that Rick's gambling addiction followed predictable patterns, and that my compliance with his demands would likely have led to additional crises requiring further sacrifice of my educational and career goals. Dr. Martinez also connected me with campus resources including emergency financial assistance, food services, and employment opportunities that could support my independence while maintaining academic progress. These resources demonstrated the university's commitment to helping students overcome external obstacles that threaten their educational success. The emergency dormitory room provided immediate housing stability while I searched for longer-term accommodation. The space was basic but clean, offering privacy and security that allowed me to focus on academics and employment rather than constantly worrying about personal safety and shelter. My roommate situation introduced me to other students facing similar challenges, creating an informal support network of young adults who understood the complexities of maintaining educational commitments while dealing with family dysfunction and financial instability. Sarah, a junior studying social work, had been living independently since her mother's addiction had made their home environment unsafe for academic focus. Her experience provided practical guidance about managing finances, finding affordable housing, and maintaining emotional equilibrium during family crises. "The hardest part isn't the practical stuff like finding places to sleep or shower," Sarah explained during one of our late-night conversations. "It's accepting that your family's problems don't define your worth or determine your future possibilities." Her insight resonated deeply with my own struggle to separate my identity and self-worth from my family's approval and support. The process of building independence required not just practical skills, but psychological separation from external validation that had previously shaped my self-perception. The campus employment office provided my first opportunity to increase my income through additional part-time work. The tutoring center offered positions that aligned with my academic strengths while providing flexible scheduling that accommodated my class commitments. My experience helping struggling students with mathematics and writing revealed capabilities I had not fully recognized, building confidence in my ability to provide value through my knowledge and skills, rather than simply performing routine tasks for hourly wages. The tutoring work also connected me with faculty members who became informal mentors, providing guidance about academic planning and career development that compensated for the loss of family support and encouragement. Professor Williams, who supervised the tutoring program, noticed my dedication and academic performance, despite my challenging personal circumstances. Her recommendation led to a research assistant position that provided additional income while building valuable experience for graduate school applications. Jessica, your resilience and commitment to academic excellence despite your personal challenges demonstrate exactly the qualities we look for in future graduate students, Professor Williams commented during our weekly supervision meeting. Her recognition of my potential provided crucial encouragement during a period when I questioned whether my sacrifices to maintain my education would ultimately prove worthwhile. The validation from academic professionals helped sustain my motivation when family criticism and social isolation threatened my resolve. The process of establishing financial independence revealed both my capabilities and my limitations. While I could generate sufficient income to cover basic living expenses, the constant pressure of earning money while maintaining academic performance created stress that sometimes affected my health and emotional stability. Learning to manage this pressure required developing new skills in time management, stress reduction, and self-care that would prove valuable throughout my adult life. The experience of surviving crisis taught me that I possessed greater resilience and resourcefulness than I had previously understood. My communication with my mother during this period reflected her internal conflict between loyalty to Rick and concern for my welfare. Our weekly phone conversations provided emotional connection, while also revealing the ongoing dysfunction in their household. Jessica, Rick is getting worse, she confided during one particularly difficult call. He's gambling more frequently now, and he's becoming angry and suspicious about everything. I think he blames me for not making you come home. Her reports confirmed my assessment that compliance with Rick's demands would not have solved the underlying problems driving our family crisis. His gambling addiction was progressing regardless of my presence or absence, validating my decision to maintain independence rather than enabling his destructive behavior. The emotional toll of family separation challenged my psychological resilience in ways that academic or financial pressures had not. While I could develop strategies for managing practical challenges, the loss of family connection created grief that required time and professional support to process effectively. Regular counseling sessions with Dr. Martinez provided a framework for understanding my emotional responses and developing healthy coping mechanisms that did not compromise my academic or career objectives. These sessions taught me that healing from family trauma required active effort rather than simple passage of time. The process of building independence also revealed the importance of creating chosen family relationships with people who shared my values and supported my goals. The friendships I developed with other students, faculty members, and community members provided emotional sustenance that biological family relationships had previously supplied. My academic performance during this crisis period actually improved as I channeled stress and determination into scholarly achievement. The recognition that my education represented my primary pathway to long-term security motivated exceptional effort and focus that produced my highest grades to date. The contrast between my academic success and my family's ongoing crisis reinforced my understanding that I had made the correct decision in prioritizing my education over immediate family demands. While the emotional cost remained significant, the practical benefits of maintaining my educational trajectory were becoming increasingly apparent. As the 30-day emergency housing period approached its conclusion, I had successfully established the foundation for independent survival while maintaining academic progress. The experience had transformed me from a dependent family member into a self-reliant young adult capable of navigating complex challenges through strategic thinking and persistent effort. The skills I developed during this period would prove essential for the greater challenges that lay ahead, including finding permanent housing, managing increased financial pressures, and dealing with the ongoing emotional impact of family estrangement. However, I had demonstrated to myself that survival and success were possible through my own efforts, regardless of external support or approval. In our next episode, we will explore my search for permanent housing and the development of a sustainable financial plan that would allow me to complete my education while maintaining independence. We will see how the lessons learned during crisis created capabilities that extended far beyond immediate survival needs. The transition from emergency housing to permanent accommodation required strategic planning and financial discipline that would fundamentally alter my approach to resource management and long-term decision-making. The 30-day deadline for vacating the university dormitory created urgency that forced rapid evaluation of housing alternatives while maintaining focus on academic responsibilities and income generation. My systematic research into affordable housing options revealed the complex economics of independent living for college students without family financial support. Traditional apartment rentals required income verification showing monthly earnings of 3 times the rental amount, security deposits equivalent to first and last month's rent, and utility connection fees that collectively exceeded my available resources. The mathematical reality of my financial position demanded creative solutions that balanced immediate housing needs with long-term educational objectives. My monthly income from campus employment totaled approximately $1,200, which could theoretically support rental payments of $400 per month, while leaving $800 for food, transportation, utilities, and academic expenses. However, the upfront costs associated with traditional rental agreements would have consumed my entire savings without providing sustainable monthly payment structures. This constraint forced exploration of alternative housing arrangements that prioritized cash flow management over conventional rental relationships. Room-sharing opportunities presented the most viable, immediate solution, offering access to established households where existing tenants sought additional occupants to reduce individual housing costs. These arrangements typically required smaller security deposits and provided access to furnished spaces with established utility services. The process of evaluating potential living situations required careful assessment of compatibility factors, including study habits, cleanliness standards, noise tolerance, and scheduling coordination. My academic commitments demanded quiet environments during specific hours, while my work schedule required flexibility in common area usage and bathroom access. After visiting 12 potential room-sharing situations, I identified a suitable arrangement with 2 graduate students who maintained similar academic schedules and study disciplines. The house was located within walking distance of campus, reducing transportation costs while providing convenient access to library resources and evening study sessions. My new housemates, Jennifer and Michael, were pursuing advanced degrees in psychology and engineering respectively. Their serious academic focus created an environment conducive to scholarly achievement, while their graduate student experience provided valuable guidance about balancing work responsibilities with educational demands. The financial terms of our housing arrangement required monthly payments of $350 plus shared utility costs, creating manageable cash flow requirements while providing access to private bedroom space and shared common areas including kitchen facilities and laundry equipment. The process of establishing this housing stability required careful negotiation of household responsibilities and expectations. Our written agreement specified cleaning schedules, quiet hours, guest policies, and financial obligations that protected all parties while creating predictable living conditions supportive of academic success. The psychological impact of securing permanent housing extended beyond simple shelter provision to encompass fundamental security that enabled focus on longer-term planning and goal achievement. The constant anxiety about accommodation that had characterized my first month of independence was replaced by confidence in my ability to maintain stable living conditions through systematic planning and financial discipline. This housing stability created the foundation for expanding my income generation strategies beyond basic survival needs toward building financial reserves that could support educational expenses and emergency situations. The security of knowing I had reliable shelter allowed mental energy to be redirected toward academic excellence and career development activities. My academic performance during this period reflected the positive impact of housing stability on cognitive function and stress management. With basic survival needs addressed through sustainable systems, I could dedicate full attention to coursework and research activities that would determine my long-term career prospects. The research assistant position with Professor Williams evolved into a more substantial role that provided exposure to advanced academic methodologies and publication opportunities. This experience proved invaluable for graduate school preparation, while generating additional income that enhanced my financial security. Professor Williams recognized my commitment and capabilities, offering increased responsibilities that included data analysis, literature review, and conference presentation preparation. These activities provided practical experience with professional academic work while building credentials that would strengthen future graduate school applications. The development of research skills during this period created expertise that extended beyond my immediate academic requirements to encompass transferable capabilities valuable in various professional contexts. Statistical analysis, technical writing, and project management experience became assets that distinguished me from peers who had not faced similar independence challenges. My tutoring responsibilities expanded as word spread about my effectiveness in helping struggling students achieve academic improvement. The combination of subject matter expertise and empathetic understanding of student challenges created demand for my services that exceeded my available time capacity. This increased demand allowed me to be selective about tutoring commitments, focusing on students whose needs aligned with my strengths, while commanding higher hourly rates that reflected the specialized value I provided. The ability to choose clients based on mutual benefit rather than desperate need for income represented significant progress toward professional autonomy. The financial management skills I developed during this period proved essential for maintaining stability while building resources for future opportunities. Detailed budgeting systems allowed precise tracking of income and expenses while identifying areas where efficiency improvements could generate additional savings. My monthly budget allocated specific amounts for housing, food, transportation, academic supplies, and emergency reserves. This systematic approach to financial planning eliminated the stress of uncertain cash flow, while ensuring that essential needs remained consistently addressed through predictable resource allocation. The discipline required for effective financial management during this period created habits and perspectives that would serve me throughout my adult life. The experience of living within constrained means while achieving ambitious goals taught me that financial success depends more on systematic management than absolute income levels. My relationship with my mother during this period evolved as she observed my successful adaptation to independent living and continued academic achievement. Her initial concern about my ability to survive without family support gradually transformed into pride in my accomplishments and growing confidence in my judgment. "Jessica, I have to admit that I was worried about your decision to leave when Rick gave you that ultimatum," she confided during one of our weekly phone conversations. "But seeing how well you're managing everything on your own makes me realize that you were probably right about what you needed to do." Her acknowledgement of my success provided emotional validation that complemented the practical achievements I had accomplished through independent effort. The recognition from someone whose opinion mattered deeply helped heal some of the wounds created by the family crisis, while reinforcing my confidence in the choices I had made. My mother's reports about Rick's continued gambling and increasingly erratic behavior confirmed that my refusal to enable his addiction had been the appropriate response to his demands. His problems had not been resolved through my departure, but had instead escalated as his access to resources diminished and his psychological stability deteriorated. He started borrowing money from his coworkers and selling personal belongings to fund his gambling, she reported with obvious distress. "Yesterday I found out that he sold his tools without telling me. Those tools were how he made his living." The progression of Rick's addiction validated my understanding that family loyalty could not solve problems created by psychological dysfunction. His willingness to sacrifice essential resources for gambling opportunities demonstrated that no amount of financial support from family members would have addressed the underlying compulsions driving his destructive behavior. These conversations with my mother also revealed her growing awareness of the manipulation and emotional abuse that Rick had employed in his attempts to control my behavior. Her perspective on our family dynamics was evolving as she gained distance from the immediate crisis and observed the consequences of different approaches to handling addiction-related demands. "I realize now that Rick was trying to make you responsible for fixing problems that only he could address," she admitted during one particularly honest conversation. "I should have supported your decision from the beginning instead of hoping that compromise might work." Her growing understanding of the situation provided foundation for rebuilding our relationship on terms that acknowledged my adult autonomy while maintaining emotional connection. This development offered hope that family relationships could be restored through honest communication and mutual respect, rather than manipulation and control. My academic performance during this period of stable housing and financial management reached new levels of excellence that reflected the positive impact of security on cognitive function and motivation. The courses in my major field demonstrated particular improvement, as I could dedicate full attention to complex concepts without distraction from survival concerns. The confidence I gained through successful independent living translated into greater assertiveness in academic settings, leading to more meaningful participation in class discussions and stronger relationships with faculty members who could provide guidance and opportunities for professional development. Professor Williams noticed this transformation and commented on the maturation she observed in my academic approach. Jessica, your recent work demonstrates not just intellectual capability but also the kind of practical wisdom that comes from real-world experience. That combination will serve you well in graduate school and beyond. Her observation highlighted an unexpected benefit of my crisis experience. The challenges I had faced and overcome created depth of character and practical knowledge that distinguished me from peers who had not confronted similar obstacles. This experiential learning complemented my formal education in ways that enhanced my overall preparation for adult professional responsibilities. The networking relationships I developed through my various campus employment positions created opportunities for advancement that would not have been available through traditional student pathways. Faculty members, administrators, and staff who observed my work ethic and reliability began recommending me for positions and opportunities that provided enhanced income and professional experience. These recommendations led to a summer research fellowship that would provide full-time income during the break between academic years while building credentials for graduate school applications. The fellowship represented validation of my academic potential, while solving the practical problem of maintaining financial stability during periods when campus employment was unavailable. The transformation from crisis survival to strategic opportunity creation marked a fundamental shift in my relationship with challenges and uncertainty. Rather than viewing obstacles as threats to be endured, I had learned to analyze difficulties as problems to be solved through systematic thinking and persistent effort. This change in perspective created confidence that I could handle whatever challenges might arise in the future, whether they involved academic demands, professional responsibilities, or personal relationships. The experience of building independence from nothing had demonstrated capabilities I had not known I possessed, while creating skills that would serve me throughout my adult life. The housing stability I had achieved provided the foundation for the next phase of my development, which would involve building professional networks and credentials that could support advanced educational opportunities and career advancement. The lessons learned through necessity were now becoming tools for strategic progress toward long-term objectives. In our next episode, we will explore how the confidence and capabilities I developed through crisis management enabled me to pursue opportunities and relationships that would have seemed impossible during my initial period of family dependence. We will see how adversity can become the foundation for achievements that exceed original expectations and aspirations. The second semester of my sophomore year brought unexpected complications that tested the stability I had worked so diligently to establish. Success in creating sustainable independence had generated new challenges that required different skills and strategies than those that had enabled my initial survival and adaptation to homeless circumstances. The research fellowship that had provided financial security and academic advancement created scheduling conflicts with my existing employment commitments. The increased responsibilities and time requirements of advanced research work exceeded the capacity of my carefully balanced academic and work schedule, forcing difficult decisions about resource allocation and priority management. Professor Williams expressed concern about my ability to maintain excellence across multiple demanding commitments when she observed signs of stress and fatigue during our weekly supervision meetings. Her recognition of my overextension reflected genuine care for my welfare, while also protecting the quality of research outcomes that bore her professional reputation. Jessica, your commitment and work ethic are exceptional, but I'm concerned that you're approaching the limits of what anyone can reasonably manage simultaneously, she explained during a candid conversation about my responsibilities. We need to discuss realistic expectations that allow you to succeed without compromising your health or academic performance. Her intervention forced acknowledgement that my drive to maximize income and opportunities had created unsustainable demands that threatened the achievements I sought to protect. The irony of success creating obstacles that endangered continued progress required careful analysis and strategic adjustment of my approach to opportunity management. The financial pressures that had motivated acceptance of every available income source were no longer as urgent, given my established housing stability and improved earning capacity. However, the psychological patterns developed during crisis periods made it difficult to refuse opportunities, even when rational analysis suggested that selective focus would produce better outcomes. This recognition marked an important transition in my development from survival-focused decision-making to strategic choice evaluation based on long-term objectives rather than immediate resource acquisition. The skills required for this transition differed significantly from those that had enabled successful crisis management and independence establishment. My academic advisor, Dr. Patricia Chen, provided guidance about balancing competing demands while maintaining progress toward degree completion and graduate school preparation. Her perspective as someone who had observed numerous students navigate similar challenges offered valuable insight about sustainable approaches to academic and professional development. The most successful students learn to distinguish between opportunities that advance their core objectives and distractions that appear valuable but ultimately detract from focus and achievement, she explained during our semester planning meeting. Your current challenge is learning to say no to good opportunities in order to excel at great ones. This principle required fundamental changes in my decision-making framework, shifting from resource maximization strategies appropriate for crisis situations to opportunity optimization approaches necessary for sustained high-level performance. The psychological adjustment proved more challenging than the practical implementation of new scheduling and commitment systems. The housing arrangement with Jennifer and Michael faced disruption when Michael received an unexpected fellowship that required relocation to another state. His departure threatened the financial viability of our shared living situation, while also eliminating the graduate student mentorship that had supported my academic development during the previous semester. The search for a replacement housemate revealed the challenges of maintaining stable living arrangements when success and advancement create natural turnover among ambitious individuals. The pool of potential candidates included students whose academic focus and lifestyle compatibility varied significantly from the standards that had made our previous arrangement successful. After interviewing 8 prospective housemates, Jennifer and I selected David, a senior majoring in business administration who demonstrated appropriate study habits and financial reliability. However, his different academic schedule and social preferences required adjustment of household routines and expectations that had supported my productivity during the previous semester. The process of renegotiating living arrangements while maintaining academic and work commitments illustrated the ongoing nature of stability maintenance in independent living situations. The systems that had provided security and efficiency required continuous attention and periodic adjustment to remain effective as circumstances evolved. My relationship with my mother continued to evolve as her understanding of Rick's condition progressed and her awareness of my success increased. Her growing confidence in my judgment created opportunities for more honest communication about family dynamics, while also revealing her increasing isolation as Rick's behavior became more erratic and socially problematic. "Jessica, I think I need to start making some decisions about my own future," she confided during one of our conversations. "Rick's gambling has gotten worse since you left, and now he's starting to blame me for not forcing you to come home and help with expenses." Her recognition that Rick's problems extended beyond financial difficulties to encompass emotional abuse and psychological manipulation represented significant progress in understanding the true nature of addiction-related family dysfunction. This awareness created possibilities for her own healing and independence that had not existed, while she remained focused on enabling his destructive behavior. "I've been thinking about attending some support group meetings for families affected by gambling addiction," she continued. "I realize that I don't really understand what we're dealing with or how to handle it appropriately." The decision to seek professional guidance and peer support demonstrated courage and wisdom that had been impossible while she remained committed to managing Rick's problems through accommodation and financial assistance. Her willingness to acknowledge the limitations of her individual efforts reflected growing understanding of addiction as a medical condition requiring specialized treatment. These conversations with my mother provided emotional support, while also confirming that my refusal to enable Rick's demands had been appropriate and necessary. Her direct experience with the progression of his condition validated my assessment that compliance would not have solved underlying problems, but would instead have delayed recognition of the need for professional intervention. The Summer Research Fellowship created opportunities for professional development that exceeded the scope of typical undergraduate experiences. The project involved collaboration with faculty from multiple universities and exposure to advanced methodologies that provided valuable preparation for graduate-level academic work. However, the intensity and sophistication of the research environment also revealed gaps in my preparation that required rapid skill development to maintain competence among more experienced participants. The learning curve proved steep and demanding, requiring dedication of time and energy that strained my other commitments and responsibilities. Dr. Williams provided mentorship that helped navigate these challenges while building confidence in my ability to contribute meaningfully to advanced research activities. Her guidance about managing imposter syndrome and leveraging learning opportunities created psychological frameworks that supported success despite initial feelings of inadequacy. Every successful researcher experiences moments of doubt about their capabilities when exposed to new levels of complexity and expectation, she reassured during a particularly challenging period of the fellowship. The key is recognizing these feelings as normal responses to growth rather than evidence of inadequacy. Her perspective helped reframe the discomfort of intellectual stretching as positive indicators of skill development rather than signs of failure or poor preparation. This psychological adjustment proved essential for maintaining motivation and performance during the most demanding phases of the research project. The fellowship also provided exposure to graduate students and faculty whose career paths illustrated various approaches to academic and professional development. These informal mentoring relationships offered insights about graduate school selection, funding strategies, and career planning that complemented the formal guidance available through university advising systems. The networking opportunities created through research collaboration generated invitations to present findings at academic conferences, providing visibility within professional communities that could support future graduate school applications and career advancement. These presentations required development of communication skills that extended beyond classroom experience to encompass professional academic discourse. My first conference presentation created anxiety about performing competently in front of established researchers and graduate students whose expertise exceeded my own. However, the positive reception of my work and the constructive feedback provided by audience members built confidence in my ability to contribute to scholarly conversations and professional academic communities. The recognition received through conference participation created additional opportunities for research collaboration and professional development that required careful evaluation against my academic schedule and long-term objectives. The abundance of possibilities created decision-making challenges that differed significantly from the resource scarcity that had characterized earlier periods of my independence. My financial situation during this period reflected the success of systematic planning and disciplined resource management. The combination of fellowship income, continued tutoring activities, and reduced living expenses had created modest savings that provided security while also enabling strategic investments in professional development activities. However, the time demands of managing multiple income sources while maintaining academic excellence created efficiency challenges that required optimization of scheduling and priority allocation. The goal shifted from maximum income generation to optimal resource utilization that supported long-term objectives rather than immediate financial accumulation. The psychological adjustment to financial security after months of survival-focused budgeting required conscious effort to avoid both excessive frugality and irresponsible spending. The experience of scarcity had created conservative financial habits that served as protection against future instability, while also limiting investment in opportunities that could accelerate professional development. My academic performance during this period maintained excellence, despite increased complexity of commitments and responsibilities. The courses in my major field continued to provide intellectual satisfaction while building expertise that would support graduate school success and career advancement in my chosen field. The combination of research experience, conference presentations, and strong academic performance created a competitive profile for graduate school applications that exceeded my initial expectations when I had first committed to maintaining my education despite family opposition. The investments in independence and academic focus were generating returns that validated the sacrifices required for their achievement. The relationships I had developed with faculty members evolved into genuine mentoring partnerships that provided guidance about professional development, while also offering personal support during challenging periods. These relationships represented chosen family connections that complemented biological family relationships, while providing the intellectual stimulation and career guidance that my educational objectives required. Professor Williams became particularly influential in helping me envision graduate school possibilities and career trajectories that aligned with my interests and capabilities. Her recommendation would prove crucial for competitive fellowship applications, while her ongoing guidance provided frameworks for making strategic decisions about my academic and professional future. The obstacles I encountered during this period taught important lessons about sustainable success management and strategic opportunity evaluation. The experience of navigating challenges created by achievement rather than failure provided different but equally valuable skills for long-term professional development and personal growth. In our next episode, we will explore how the confidence and capabilities I had developed through overcoming various challenges prepared me for the breakthrough moment that would transform my academic trajectory and create opportunities that exceeded my original aspirations. We will see how persistent effort and strategic thinking can generate compound benefits that multiply initial investments in education and professional development. The moment that would fundamentally alter my academic trajectory arrived through an unexpected email from Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the Director of Graduate Studies at Stanford University's Department of Psychology. Her message, received on a Tuesday morning in October of my junior year, represented the culmination of efforts that had begun during my darkest period of family crisis and homelessness. The email requested a phone interview regarding my application for the prestigious Morrison Fellowship, a full-ride doctoral program that provided complete funding for 5 years of graduate study, plus research stipends and conference travel allowances. I had submitted the application months earlier with modest expectations, viewing it as valuable practice for the graduate school application process rather than a realistic opportunity given my unconventional undergraduate experience. Dr. Rodriguez had reviewed my research portfolio, conference presentations, and academic transcripts, but her primary interest centered on the personal statement that detailed my journey from family abandonment through academic achievement, despite financial and housing instability. The narrative had apparently distinguished my application from hundreds of other candidates with similar academic credentials. Ms. Jessica, your academic performance is certainly impressive, but what captured our attention was the resilience and determination you demonstrated in maintaining educational excellence while facing circumstances that cause many students to withdraw from university entirely, she explained during our initial phone conversation. Her words represented the first external recognition that my personal struggles had created strengths and perspectives that enhanced rather than diminished my value as a graduate school candidate. The challenges I had sometimes viewed as obstacles to academic advancement were being recognized as evidence of character traits that predicted success in demanding doctoral programs. The interview process extended across 3 weeks and included conversations with faculty members, current graduate students, and program administrators who evaluated my research interests, academic preparation, and cultural fit within Stanford's collaborative research environment. Each conversation provided validation of my capabilities while also challenging me to articulate my intellectual goals and professional aspirations with greater clarity and sophistication. Professor Williams provided crucial support during this process, serving as a reference while also helping me prepare for the complex discussions about research methodology and theoretical frameworks that characterized graduate-level academic discourse. Her mentorship ensured that I could participate confidently in conversations with senior faculty, whose expertise represented the pinnacle of achievement in my chosen field. Jessica, your combination of academic excellence, research experience, and demonstrated resilience creates a profile that doctoral programs actively seek, Professor Williams reassured during one of our preparation sessions. Your personal journey has developed qualities that cannot be taught through coursework alone. The recognition that my crisis experience had generated valuable personal and professional development marked a fundamental shift in my understanding of how challenges and achievements interconnect throughout life trajectories. The obstacles I had overcome were not merely difficulties to be endured, but rather formative experiences that had built capabilities essential for success in highly competitive academic and professional environments. The notification of my acceptance into the Morrison Fellowship program arrived 3 days before Thanksgiving, creating a moment of triumph that felt almost surreal given the contrast with my circumstances exactly 2 years earlier, when I had been sleeping in my car outside a 24-hour diner, uncertain whether I could continue my education at all. The fellowship provided complete financial support for doctoral studies, including tuition, fees, health insurance, and a generous living stipend that would eliminate all concerns about basic survival needs, while allowing complete focus on research and academic advancement. The transformation from homeless teenager to fully funded doctoral candidate represented vindication of every difficult decision I had made in prioritizing education over family demands. My mother's reaction to the news reflected her complete evolution in understanding both my capabilities and the wisdom of the choices I had made during our family crisis. The pride and excitement in her voice carried no trace of the doubt and concern that had characterized her earlier responses to my independence and academic commitments. "Jessica, I am so incredibly proud of you," she said, her voice breaking with emotion during our celebratory phone call. "When you left that night after Rick's ultimatum, I was terrified that you were making a terrible mistake. Now I understand that you were the only one of us who really understood what needed to happen." Her acknowledgement represented more than simple maternal pride in my achievement. It constituted recognition that my assessment of our family situation had been accurate, and that my refusal to enable Rick's addiction had been morally and practically correct, despite the immediate emotional costs. The conversation also revealed the extent of Rick's continued deterioration and the validation of my predictions about the futility of financial assistance in addressing gambling addiction. His condition had worsened significantly during the 2 years since my departure, confirming that compliance with his demands would not have solved underlying problems but would instead have delayed necessary intervention while sacrificing my educational future. "Rick has been in and out of treatment programs 3 times since you left," my mother reported with obvious exhaustion. "Each time he promises that things will be different, but within weeks he's back to the casinos. I finally understand that I can't fix this problem for him." Her recognition of the limitations of family intervention in addressing addiction represented the same insight that had guided my initial refusal to abandon college in response to Rick's financial crisis. The professional treatment and personal accountability that addiction recovery requires cannot be substituted through family sacrifice or financial assistance from relatives. The Stanford Fellowship also created opportunities to reconnect with my brother Marcus, whose military service had limited our communication during my period of family crisis and academic struggle. His pride in my achievement carried special significance given his own commitment to excellence and service within the demanding culture of Navy SEAL operations. Marcus had been deployed during the most difficult phases of my independence establishment, receiving only brief updates about my situation through occasional emails that necessarily minimized the extent of my challenges to avoid creating worry that could distract from his dangerous military responsibilities. The fellowship acceptance provided our first opportunity for comprehensive discussion about my experiences and his perspective on family loyalty versus personal development. "Jessica, what you accomplished takes a different kind of courage than what we deal with in military operations," he observed during our first extended conversation in over a year. "We have training, equipment, and team support for our challenges. You faced your obstacles alone and still achieved something extraordinary." His comparison between military and civilian forms of courage provided a framework for understanding my experience that eliminated any remaining doubts about whether my choices had demonstrated strength or selfishness. The validation from someone whose judgment I respected deeply helped integrate my sense of identity as both a loyal family member and an independent individual committed to personal excellence. Marcus also shared his perspective on Rick's demands and the impossible position that gambling addiction had created within our family structure. His military experience with leadership under pressure provided insights about the difference between reasonable sacrifice for collective benefit and manipulation that exploits loyalty for individual advantage. In the military, we ask people to sacrifice for missions that serve purposes larger than individual comfort or convenience, he explained. What Rick was asking you to do served only his addiction and would have prevented you from building capabilities that could benefit everyone long term. This analysis reinforced my understanding that genuine family loyalty sometimes requires refusing demands that appear to serve immediate family needs but actually perpetuate destructive patterns that harm everyone involved. The distinction between enabling and supporting becomes crucial when addiction or other forms of dysfunction distort normal relationship dynamics. The Stanford Fellowship created opportunities for research collaboration that would have been impossible without the complete financial support and prestigious institutional affiliation that the program provided. My placement in Dr. Sarah Kim's laboratory focused on resilience and post-traumatic growth, topics that aligned perfectly with my academic interests while also connecting to my personal experience in meaningful ways. Dr. Kim's research examined the psychological mechanisms through which individuals transform traumatic experiences into sources of strength and wisdom that enhance their capacity for future achievement and contribution. Her theoretical framework provided academic language for understanding my own development, while also suggesting research directions that could advance scientific knowledge about human adaptability. Your personal experience with overcoming adversity while maintaining goal-directed behavior provides valuable insight or perspective on the phenomena we study, Dr. Kim explained during our initial research meeting. However, your academic training and analytical skills will allow you to contribute objective insights that extend beyond individual anecdotal experience. The combination of personal relevance and scientific rigor created research opportunities that felt both intellectually stimulating and personally meaningful. The ability to contribute to knowledge that might help others navigate similar challenges provided additional motivation for excellence that complemented the intrinsic satisfaction of academic achievement. My first semester at Stanford exceeded my expectations across every dimension of graduate student experience. The intellectual stimulation of advanced coursework, the collaborative excitement of cutting-edge research, and the supportive community of fellow doctoral students created an environment that validated every sacrifice I had made to reach this level of academic opportunity. The financial security provided by the fellowship eliminated concerns about basic survival that had constrained my undergraduate experience, allowing complete focus on learning and research activities that would determine my long-term career trajectory. The psychological relief of not worrying about rent, food, or transportation costs created mental space for creativity and intellectual risk-taking that enhanced both my academic performance and personal satisfaction. The research project I developed during my first year examined factors that predict successful adaptation among college students who experience family rejection related to educational choices. The study design incorporated both quantitative measures of academic and psychological outcomes and qualitative interviews that explored the subjective experience of navigating family conflict while maintaining educational goals. The preliminary findings suggested that students who maintain clear boundaries between family approval and personal worth demonstrate better long-term outcomes across multiple measures of academic success and psychological well-being. These results provided empirical support for the decision-making framework I had developed through personal experience, while also contributing to scientific understanding of family dynamics and individual resilience. The opportunity to present these findings at national conferences created visibility within the academic community that opened doors for additional research collaborations and professional development opportunities. The positive reception of my work provided external validation of my potential as a researcher, while also creating networks that would support continued career advancement. The transformation from homeless teenager to recognized graduate researcher represented more than personal achievement. It demonstrated the possibility of overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles through strategic thinking, persistent effort, and unwillingness to accept external limitations on personal potential. The fellowship also created opportunities to give back to other students facing similar challenges through mentoring programs and speaking engagements that shared practical strategies for maintaining educational goals despite family opposition or financial constraints. These activities provided personal satisfaction while also fulfilling professional obligations to contribute to student success and community welfare. My relationship with my mother continued to strengthen as she witnessed the long-term benefits of the choices I had made during our family crisis. Her growing understanding of addiction and family dynamics created possibilities for honest communication, that had not existed during the period of active crisis management. Rick's continued struggles with gambling addiction had eventually led to their separation and his enrollment in an intensive treatment program that required acknowledgement of the harm his behavior had caused to family relationships. While his recovery remained uncertain, the professional intervention represented progress that would not have occurred if family members had continued enabling his destructive behavior through financial assistance and emotional accommodation. The validation of my original assessment of our family situation provided closure to the guilt and doubt that had occasionally surfaced during the most challenging periods of my independence. The evidence that my choices had been correct both for my own development and for encouraging appropriate intervention in Rick's addiction confirmed the wisdom of prioritizing long-term welfare over short-term harmony. In our next episode, we will explore how the confidence and capabilities I developed through overcoming adversity prepared me for even greater challenges and opportunities that would extend my impact beyond personal achievement to encompass contribution to others facing similar obstacles. We will see how individual transformation can become the foundation for broader positive change that multiplies the benefits of personal growth and resilience. The transition into my final undergraduate year marked a fundamental shift from managing immediate challenges to strategically positioning myself for long-term success across multiple dimensions of professional and personal development. The stability I had achieved through careful planning and persistent effort created opportunities to expand my influence and impact beyond the narrow focus on survival that had characterized my earlier independence period. My academic standing had evolved to place me among the top performers in my graduating class, with a cumulative grade point average that reflected consistent excellence despite the extraordinary personal circumstances that had shaped my college experience. The recognition this achievement generated from faculty members and university administrators created access to opportunities that would have been impossible during my initial crisis period. The psychology department selected me for a competitive undergraduate research fellowship that provided direct collaboration with graduate students and faculty members on projects examining resilience and post-traumatic growth in young adults. This research focus aligned perfectly with my personal experience, while offering scientific frameworks for understanding the psychological mechanisms that enable individuals to transform adversity into strength and wisdom. Dr. Amanda Foster, the principal investigator for the research program, recognized that my unique combination of academic excellence and lived experience with overcoming significant obstacles provided valuable perspective for understanding the factors that predict successful adaptation following family trauma and financial crisis. Jessica, your ability to maintain academic performance while navigating complex personal challenges provides insight into resilience processes that our laboratory needs to understand more comprehensively, she explained during our initial research planning meeting. Your analytical skills combined with your experiential knowledge create opportunities for research contributions that extend beyond typical undergraduate capabilities. The validation of my personal struggles as scientifically valuable represented a profound reframing of experiences I had sometimes viewed as obstacles to academic achievement. The recognition that my crisis management and adaptation processes could contribute to knowledge that might benefit others facing similar challenges provided additional meaning and purpose to the difficulties I had overcome. The research fellowship expanded my professional network to include graduate students and faculty members from multiple universities who were conducting related studies on factors that promote successful transitions from adolescence to independent adulthood. These connections created opportunities for conference presentations and collaborative projects that enhanced my visibility within the academic community. My first presentation at a regional psychology conference examined the relationship between family conflict and academic motivation among college students who maintain educational goals despite opposition from family members. The research findings suggested that students who develop clear boundaries between family approval and personal worth demonstrate superior long-term outcomes across multiple measures of psychological well-being and academic achievement. The positive reception of this presentation generated invitations to present similar research at additional conferences while also creating opportunities for publication in undergraduate research journals. These scholarly activities provided concrete evidence of my potential for graduate-level academic work, while building credentials that would strengthen applications for doctoral programs and competitive fellowships. The expansion of my academic activities required sophisticated time management strategies that balanced research responsibilities with continued employment obligations and coursework demands. The complexity of coordinating multiple high-level commitments provided valuable experience with project management and priority allocation that would prove essential for graduate school success. My tutoring services evolved during this period from basic academic assistance to specialized coaching for students facing family difficulties that threatened their educational progress. The combination of academic expertise and personal experience with overcoming family-related obstacles created demand for services that extended beyond traditional tutoring to encompass mentoring and emotional support. Students who were dealing with family financial crises, parental opposition to educational goals, or housing instability sought guidance about strategies for maintaining academic focus while managing external pressures that threatened their ability to complete degree requirements. The peer support I provided created an informal network of students who shared experiences and resources for navigating complex challenges. This mentoring work provided personal satisfaction while also generating additional income that enhanced my financial security and reduced concerns about covering graduate school application expenses and potential interview travel costs. The ability to help others while simultaneously building my own resources represented efficient use of time and capabilities that maximized multiple objectives simultaneously. My relationship with my mother continued to deepen as she observed my sustained success and growing recognition within the university community. Her pride in my achievements was accompanied by increasing understanding of the wisdom demonstrated through my refusal to sacrifice educational goals in response to Rick's gambling-related demands. Jessica, I realize now that your decision to maintain your independence and continue your education despite Rick's ultimatum was the most mature and responsible choice anyone in our family made during that crisis, she reflected during one of our weekly conversations. I was so focused on keeping the family together that I could not see that enabling his demands would have prevented the intervention he actually needed. Her acknowledgement represented complete validation of the decision-making framework I had developed during our family crisis. The recognition that my approach had been correct both for my own development and for encouraging appropriate professional intervention in Rick's addiction provided closure to any remaining doubts about the choices I had made. My mother also shared updates about Rick's progress through treatment programs and his gradual recognition of the harm his gambling addiction had caused to family relationships and financial security. While his recovery remained a work in progress, the professional intervention that had eventually occurred validated my assessment that family enabling would have delayed, rather than facilitated the help he needed. Rick has been attending counseling sessions regularly and has not gambled for 8 months now, she reported with cautious optimism. He has expressed remorse for the ultimatum he gave you and the pressure he put on our family to solve problems that only he could address through professional treatment. The progress reports about Rick's recovery provided relief, while also confirming that my refusal to comply with his demands had been appropriate and necessary. The timeline of his treatment and recovery demonstrated that family sacrifice would not have addressed the underlying addiction that required professional intervention and personal accountability. My brother Marcus returned from his latest deployment during the spring semester of my senior year, providing our first opportunity for extended face-to-face conversation since the beginning of my family crisis and independence period. His perspective as a military professional who understood both individual discipline and team responsibility offered valuable insight about the balance between personal achievement and family loyalty. Marcus expressed profound respect for the way I had handled the impossible situation created by Rick's gambling addiction and ultimatum. His military experience with high-pressure decision-making provided appreciation for the courage and strategic thinking required to maintain long-term objectives despite immediate pressures for compromise or capitulation. Jessica, what you accomplished required the same kind of mental toughness and commitment to mission success that we develop in special operations training, he observed during our reunion conversation. The difference is that you had to develop those qualities on your own while dealing with people you loved who were asking you to abandon your objectives. His comparison between my experience and military training provided a framework for understanding my development that eliminated any remaining concerns about whether my choices had demonstrated selfishness or appropriate self-preservation. The recognition from someone whose judgment I respected deeply regarding courage and commitment validated my assessment of the situation and my response to it. Marcus also provided practical guidance about graduate school planning and career development based on his experience with advanced military training and leadership responsibilities. His perspective on the importance of continuous learning and skill development reinforced my commitment to pursuing doctoral studies, while providing tactical advice about application strategies and interview preparation. The validation and support from both my mother and Marcus created an emotional foundation for pursuing increasingly ambitious goals without concern about family approval or understanding. The recognition that my choices had been correct and beneficial provided confidence for making future decisions based on careful analysis rather than fear of disappointing others. My academic advisor, Dr. Patricia Chen, provided crucial guidance about graduate school selection and application strategies that maximized my chances of acceptance into top-tier doctoral programs. Her experience with the competitive landscape of graduate admissions helped me understand how to present my unique background and achievements in ways that highlighted strengths rather than dwelling on challenges. Jessica, your combination of academic excellence, research experience, and demonstrated resilience creates a profile that doctoral programs actively seek, she explained during our graduate school planning meetings. The key is presenting your story in ways that emphasize the capabilities you developed, rather than simply describing the obstacles you overcame. This reframing guidance helped me articulate my experiences in professional contexts that highlighted personal growth and skill development, rather than victim narratives that might generate sympathy but not necessarily convey competence and potential for advanced academic work. The graduate school application process required detailed personal statements that integrated my academic achievements with my personal journey in ways that demonstrated both intellectual capability and character traits that predict success in demanding doctoral programs. The writing process provided opportunities for reflection about how challenges had contributed to my development, while also clarifying my research interests and career objectives. My personal statement examined the relationship between family dynamics, individual resilience, and academic achievement in ways that positioned my research interests as natural extensions of my lived experience combined with rigorous academic preparation. The narrative demonstrated how personal challenges had generated research questions that could contribute to scientific understanding while advancing my professional development. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.